Should people buy The Last of Us 2 Remastered?
It depends.
It depends on many things.
Really depends. You know, this isn't in the same vein as The Last of Us Part 1, which was the proper remake of the original Last of Us. And that, to me, had a higher barrier for entry because we already had The Last of Us Remastered on PS4. That was already available. It was a pretty good remaster. And that remake didn't add too much, yet it was going for a premium price point. This is a much easier sell, in my opinion. It's only £39 at the time of recording in the UK. It's a $10 upgrade if you already own The Last of Us Part 2. And for those $10, if we're, criticizing it on that, I think it is, definitely worth the upgrade because of the extra features that are added on that we're definitely going to get into.
We'll break everything down because I think one of the biggest things with this was like exactly what am I getting for my $10, my £10 or whatever. And the thing is, like, I hate having to split all the hairs of resolution stuff. And like even this morning when I was talking to you, I was like, how the hell do we nail this stuff down? Excuse me. But we do have, The Last of Us 2's version that you can currently play on PS5 is the PS4 version, which was the PS4 Pro version that was then on the PS5. And that had a locked 1440p resolution with an uncapped frame rate. So the new version, Last of Us 2 Remastered, is now going for a native 4K output in fidelity mode and 1440p upscale to 4K in performance mode with an unlocked frame rate depending on what TV you have.
God.
So I just put it in performance mode all the time now.
Don't we sound like Digital Foundry doing this?
I guess
we're just as smart.
That's just where we are now. It's
just as smart.
Breaking it all down. But yeah, like you said, it's only a $10, £10 upgrade. I think for me, the immediate go-to was like, okay, how much have you actually remastered? And I, side by side, can't really tell the difference. Like, I think you'd have to really get Digital Foundry about it to make them a verb, to make that stuff work and go, like, okay, they've literally like cleaned this up slightly. But we're talking about a difference of a 1440p resolution to a 4K resolution, and my brain can't do that anyway.
My brain, at least, it's tricked itself into believing it can, because when I was playing this in the fidelity mode, just to clarify, I haven't actually played the entirety of the story. Again, I've just done a little bit, done the encounters, played the roguelike mode that we're going to talk about, the lost levels, stuff like that. So it's not a comprehensive thing. But even from that experience, like, to me, I can see those upgrades. The 4K native resolution just makes everything a little bit more crisp. The level of detail is a little bit higher. Yeah, it's not an essential upgrade if you've already played The Last of Us 2 to death, especially on the PlayStation 5. But if you're new to it, I think you will appreciate just how good it looks, or at least I did. I got a funny story. I was playing through the lost levels yesterday, and there's one that's set in a sewer.
We should super quick say that the lost levels are the 3 in-progress levels that were added to this package. It's almost like a deleted scenes thing, but you can actually control them and walk through them, and there's developer commentary that you can trigger.
Absolutely, and I've got a lot to say about those later on, actually, funny enough, because, surprise, surprise, I love them. But yeah, I was in one of these sewer levels, and I literally turned to my girlfriend and said, "This is the best-looking sewer I've ever seen." And that's not even a finished level, I was just looking at the light and the way it bounced in HDR mode, and I was thinking, maybe life doesn't get better than this sewer.
Oh, no, I can't. When I knew when we were going through it that I was just like, oh my God, I knew that we were going to clash a bit on these. Because like, I love the idea of delving into the, obviously the reality of development and showing us in progress stuff. I wish that all studios did that. I wish there was in progress versions of everything. Show the reality of making a game, highlight all that stuff, and the human cost that goes into that stuff, considering where over 10,000 people lost their jobs last year. It was just that every single one of these is over in like 5 minutes max. Like, I was like, they're nice to see, and I like you get Neil Druckmann's intro for each one, and then you get the specific art director or the person who worked on the level has something to say about each level. They're really cool in that regard, but I think it's worth pointing out that you shouldn't necessarily go into this package going, that's what's going to get my money's worth. I think it's an overall thing. Like, I think they're neat to see, but like I said, they're over super quick. The 3 of them, just to outline what they are, one of them is a party that takes place, it's a party that takes place in Jackson, but it's like an outdoor party, and it would have been treated as a flashback towards the end of the game. There's another one, which is the sewers, like you mentioned, which is set when Ellie falls into like the really strong current towards the middle of the game, and they originally had just a sewer level, which I was like, we've had a million of them. To me, that was nothing. And then the third one is another timeline jump. I think it's meant to be set after the Dina Abbey scene, and we would cut to some point in the future where Ellie's hunting a boar, and she kills it really gorily, and it's really unceremonious and whatever. But yeah, back to you.
I think, not saying that you were going in with this mindset, but if you are going into The Last of Us 2 Remastered, looking forward to those lost levels because you are expecting more The Last of Us Part 2 peak quality gameplay. Like, don't expect that. Like, they were cut for a reason.
Yeah, they were always cut levels,
You know, they were cut levels. They're unfinished. You know, like you said in the introduction video for them, like, it's explained that some things don't have assets. There's often no voice lines, no animations, stuff like that. But for me, I was coming into The Last of Us 2 Remastered mostly looking forward to not playing the game again, but getting that look behind the scenes, because you fascinated me last year by telling me about, you know, the Atari collection that you played, where, like you were saying, you know, you were getting these in-depth looks at games that were in production. And for me, playing through those lost levels, listening to the director's commentary, I realized how few bonus features we ever get in the realm of video games. Like, they were so standardized in the realm of movies. And when I was growing up, like, I learned so much about how you make a film from looking at those behind-the-scenes featurettes or listening to directors' commentaries, right?
Massively.
This is going to sound like a bit, but I learned so much about filmmaking and camera movements from the commentary on the American Pie DVD.
If only that was the first time I'd heard that.
Then I did, like, probably 4 years of film school. I'm exaggerating, of course, but, like, the way they talked about camera movements and stuff, I obviously wouldn't have known that, and it was really informative. Similarly, I know very little about video game production, so listening to the creators talk about why a section was cut, whether it was for pacing issues, whether they just couldn't get the gameplay right, to me, that was fascinating. Whether or not you think that's worth the extra $10, I don't know. For me, it was, because obviously I'm a big The Last of Us Part 2 fanboy anyway. And getting an insight into what could have been and how you make those decisions in game dev is something that feels so rare outside of the no-clip documentaries or a few other featurettes that are out there. And to me, that part of the experience is what I was looking forward to the most.
No, dude, like, by far, this is a step in the best direction. Like, that's why I keep highlighting Atari 50. The making of Karateka is another one. The work that Digital Eclipse are doing, they've got an upcoming one coming out on, I think it's on, is it Jordan Mechno? He's the dude that was just in making Karateka. But either way, you've got all of these deep dives into certain projects, interviewing the people behind them, showing in progress things. In the case of some of the Atari stuff, it's like versions of games that were made when a dude was in high school that eventually got to the one that came out. Just really fascinating stuff. And like you said, the gaming industry is always so buttoned up and NDA'd and everything, and you never get to see the reality of making these games, especially at the Naughty Dog level. So it definitely scratches that itch. It was just that for me, because it's one of the main things they advertised is, like, pay for The Last of Us 2 Remastered because you're getting these extra levels. It's worth just clarifying exactly what they are.
Absolutely.
Like, I kind of expected them to just be like nav meshes, like they wouldn't even have textures or anything, and they're in between the two. But like you said, animations aren't finished on some stuff. But they do highlight some ideas they had, like in the party scene, there was a thing where you would use your the weapon crafting ability to, like, mix drinks, and then Ellie would walk around with a drink as she's talking to people. But then they couldn't necessarily make that work because she'd have to put it down for other animations. And it's like, that's a cute, like, a fun little thing to add on. I do think that, actually, well, I guess we can go through the other ones, because what do you think of the hunting the boar one?
Honestly, right, I can already tell from your tone and maybe your face. But I played through that, got to the end, and I won't spoil everything that happens, but there's a little story beat that happens right at the end of it. And I, again, turned to my girlfriend and went, I wish that was in the final game. Right. You know, I thought they were really onto something there that was impactful emotionally, though, even though mechanically, like they even admit in the commentary for that level, they couldn't quite get it to work. So I see why it was cut, but that was the only one where I thought, this is a real shame, because this would have, for me anyway, maybe benefited to the impact of that section. But I'm not a game developer. I don't know. Just as a fan, that's what I thought. Yeah,
for me, it's like I have a wider problem with just how The Last of Us feels as an IP. And we're going to talk about that later in the podcast after this video goes up and everything. As my throat fails on me. Yet again. No, the thing is with the feel of The Last of Us, especially since part 2, it's just been like, how can we just do the most horrific, bottomed out tone possible? And I know that overall there's a lot of light in there too. And I've always made that point about The Last of Us too. But I feel like as it's gotten bigger and like the conversations around it and how sort of, like I said, just sort of morally flat it kind of tends to be, or like a tonally flat kind of, it feels like this level was just like, oh my God, okay, we'll do it again. We're going to do this really horrible thing. thing. And obviously the way the director's describing it is that we wanted it to be completely unceremonious and it's based around a kill and whatever. It's like, yeah, of course. It's like Last of Us 101 at this point. And I can see why you cut it, basically, was my thing. And after I played through it, I was like, I'm glad you didn't do that. Because that would have been even more on the nose than the rest of the game was.
It's Last of Us 2 101. I would argue against it being a kind of mission statement for the overall franchise. You know, right from the start, we knew famously or infamously, The Last of Us Part 2 was about hate. It was about being in those murky, horrible shades of morality that you described there. So to know that this ball sequence was originally part of it, I was like, right, that makes sense considering the themes that you're going for. You know, I don't think, at least in my opinion, that it's indicative of the, you know, direction of the franchise as a whole. Just this one game and one project.
Totally. I'm being entirely subjective. I'm just talking about where Last of Us is in 2024, where I'm at, you know, playing through it, seeing it go from this one game in 2013 to this huge thing now with the TV show and all the GIFs that blew up across the weekend where everyone realized they got sick of all the GIFs that are out there on Twitter and everything. We should talk about what I think is the meat of why you should spend the money on this thing, which is the no return mode. It's the roguelike mode. It's very interesting to see God of War do one as well.
Yeah.
It made me think in a more conspiratorial, wider Sony sense that they maybe had all of these modes ready for some sort of online thing, some sort of live service thing. If you're Jim Ryan, before he was stepping down, going like, we should have some more live service stuff, why not make a live service Last of Us, a live service God of War, get people paying for all the skins you can unlock, the roguelike modes, and monetize that stuff. It just wouldn't surprise me. I don't believe that Sony Santa Monica and Naughty Dog both came up with this at the same time. I think it was a wider company directive, and because that entire wing of Sony's now falling apart, Last of Us multiplayer's been cancelled, and we're getting these modes rolled out. All of that is to say this is a very, very solid mode.
Yes.
It's just interesting the way that it's rolled out.
No, I absolutely agree. You know, we don't have any information about whether this was intended to be a live service right now, but for instance, every time you finish one of the levels and you go back to what is essentially your base, I did laugh that you more or less open a loot box.
Yes.
Like it's not randomized, the stuff inside, but you are opening a box, you're getting a bunch of currency.
They could have randomized it.
Well, that's it. It did make me think, at a certain point, could you have monetized that currency that you get to make for more efficient runs? I don't know. That's being very cynical. You know, there's no real evidence about that. It's just kind of the feel that you get.
Yeah.
Like you said, lumping it in with the rest of the live service attitude from Sony over the past few years. But yeah, the mode itself, that was the one I was looking forward to the most, because while I haven't dabbled in God of War Valhalla like I know you have, and again, I'm going to make an outrageous statement. I've always loved The Last of Us Part 2's combat. I think it's as good as any third person combat system out there in terms of just its impact, its weight, its fluidity. Like, honestly, to me, man,
I'm not denying it. No,
to me, it's Max Payne 3. And it's The Last of Us Part 2.
I'm doing a face there. That's core.
And I think they're
I was with you for a while, but I don't know.
Incredible in the way that they prioritize animation.
I've never been in a room when a crime's committed. Okay.
Animation and weight and impact, and nothing makes me feel more on the back foot and improvisational than The Last of Us Part 2's combat, right? So I thought if you just give me a gauntlet of that, I'll love it. I don't think, and I went a little bit Geordie there, I didn't think it that it is the mode that I wanted it to be, but again, for $10, I'm having a lot of fun with it. I enjoy unlocking the new characters, and the combat in 60 frames per second especially is silky smooth and better than it's ever been.
It's worth saying that the structure is like a handful of levels. I think it's like 4 levels and then a boss fight. 6 levels and then a boss fight. And you're going back to a home base. You're sort of getting different equipment and stuff and going back out, having another run. And there are tons of characters to play as. Like you can't unlock Joel, but there's like a multi-step thing to get to him. Because it's kind of, you start with Ellie and Abby, and then you have both sides of their story based on who you then unlock. Like Ellie gets you Dina, which I think then gets you Jesse, which then gets you Joel. There's maybe someone in between.
Yeah, maybe.
But it's a multi-step thing anyway. Either way, you start with Ellie and Abby and you work your way forward.
Tommy's in between.
Tommy, there you go. Everyone other than Joel. I only wanted to play as Joel, and he wouldn't let me play as Joel. And so there's that. You've got to unlock him in the guitar mode as well, but we'll get there. But yeah, so like the overall mode though is just a really good showcase of the combat. And I remember just before Last of Us 2 came out, when they would show off the gameplay trailers, there was that whole thing amongst a whole bunch of devs and general fan reaction going, there's no way that it plays that well. There's no way that you can transition between aiming at someone and then ducking flipping through a bookshelf or bookcase and then shooting someone else and whatever. You totally can. Obviously, we played it back in 2020, but it is a beautiful combat system. I'm not with you that it's up there with Max Payne 3 or like Gears 2 or something, but still, it's a beautiful thing. We'll find out later in the week if it leaks in the Xbox thing. And but still, it is beautifully put together, and this is a really fun showcase of that. Like you do have lots of access to mod upgrades and different weapons, grenades, and everything. It's just a fun way to tear through a ton of people, and you get loads of skin unlocks. Like there's a really cool one for Abby with a leather jacket that looks awesome. There's some good stuff in here. So I think it's if you like roguelike structures, for me it gets a bit repetitive in terms of just the levels themselves. They're fine, but it's like I think for me, because of the amount of roguelikes that we've had, and if you draw like a whole spectrum between like Rogue Legacy and Hades and things like this and God of War, at some point you're replaying the exact same environment over and over again. It's not entirely procedurally generated. You're just being given one of a certain biome, and that can feel repetitive, or it does to me after a while.
No, I agree. You know, I wasn't fully expecting, maybe it's on me for not properly researching. I don't know how much is out there, but I wasn't fully expecting just how segmented those levels would feel. Like you said, it's a pretty small area each time, like a segmented version of a combat zone from the main game, and then you're kicked back to the home base, and then you go back again in a new level. What keeps it fresh for me, though, are the mods that you can get on each level, and some of those can get wacky. So these can change the look of a level. It can add like thick fog that makes changes the atmosphere, but also obscures enemies. But you can get like really wild ones. I think they showed off on the PlayStation Twitter yesterday the like raining Molotov mode, where you've got like literally fire explosions raining down, and that in lieu of, you know, really unique levels kept things fresh enough for me, and is encouraging me to go back to get those further unlocks and see what other custom events they have in store, because there are a few. I think it's just a shame that, like you said, it starts off really kind of slow and ramps up. Initially when I jumped in, I thought, oh, is this it? Is it just me against 9 enemies, and over and over again? Then we go back and we move on. But then it started to reveal more of itself the more I played.
Some stuff it's worth highlighting as well, that like you have like different spawn points, obviously different waves of enemies. I had a couple of times where they were just spawning behind me, even though that's where I was. And I was like, I guess over time they might have play tested that more. They might patch it, I guess, going forward. But little things like that, if you keep your head on a swivel, you'll be all right. But it's just little bits like that where maybe a more seasoned multiplayer dev might have thought of those things, or able to implement those things.
Yeah.
But I do think, Last of Us 2's multiplayer combat, was always brilliant. And this is just a really fun, like, you can just indulge in it. This is the thing that I would hang the money on. Like, I think that this is the thing that's worth paying the money if you already like Last of Us combat, because of just how visceral it is. And it's just, it is a fun, chunky combat system. So it's like, it is almost exactly what you think it is. And like I said, if you've played God of War, it's really surprising how similar they are. Like in terms of even the HUD and everything, in terms of just bringing up, like, oh, here's a list of skins, here's a list of different options for your next run. It's just kind of interesting seeing Sony do this with two franchises at almost exactly the same time.
If you can explain to me like the differences or similarities a bit more, because when I heard about God of War Valhalla, obviously everyone was talking about the story content that was involved with that.
That's the best thing in it.
The Last of Us Part 2 doesn't have any story content tied to this mode, but like, is it similar in the way that you go through levels from the main game, or are they new levels in God of War? Like, what are the differences in terms of the scale of production?
No, that's a really good distinction, because there's no story content in Last of Us 2 that we've seen anyway from the runs that we've done. Whereas God of War Valhalla, Ragnarok Valhalla is new stuff. Like it's new levels. They do repeat, like you are doing the same chunk of area over and over again.
Right.
And then the story stuff is ostensibly cutscenes that you're getting to eventually, but there's a lot of dialogue between Kratos and Mimir between every run, like fleshing into what's happened after Ragnarok finished.
Yeah.
It's well done for what it is. I get sick of Mimir, as I did back when we did the review. I was like, dude, stop telling me everything.
He's the best guy.
He's a really good guy, but he spells everything out. I'm like, just make some of it interpretational, my friend. And but yeah, I think that's the biggest selling point, I guess, with Valhalla, which is ironic because it's a free upgrade. Whereas in this case, you are paying the money to get access to it, but there is more to The Last of Us 2 remastered as an overall package.
Yeah, that's true.
So you are kind of paying the money for that.
And I suppose you could argue that God of War Ragnarok was already on PS5 natively as well, whereas this is kind of like an upgrade. I will say that while there isn't like, I think I described it a little bit poorly, because felt like I implied that there was no new content in the roguelike mode. Like you said, there are new characters which come with voice lines and skins and different play styles.
Yeah.
Each character plays differently.
Different buffs when they start a run as well.
Yeah, like Dina is spec towards crafting, Ellie's more balanced, and it just kind of goes on like that. And there are repurposed levels from the main game that work as in combat encounters here that are new. Like, obviously, we all saw Jackson in the original Last of Us Part 2, but we never got a chance to fight in Jackson this time around. We do, so it's not like you are just, going through the encounters that you can already do from the chapter select in the story. It is way more involved than that. I just wanted to kind of clarify that.
No, that's totally worth clarifying. Like I said, I think it is just a really fun indulgence in just combat, and it's distinguishable enough from. It's just an interesting thing overall as a package for this remaster, because it's like you can see almost exactly what they've done at every step of it. Whereas like for God of War Valhalla, it was like, here's this whole new mode that no one expected. It's all new story content. There's a ton of stuff in there that is brilliant in regards to if you grew up with God of War, if you know like Kratos' journey so far, to keep it as vague as possible. They do right by that. Oh, there's an alarm going off. That's the Last of Us alarm. That's catch going for. I don't know, it's on the microphones, but it's probably not too bad. But yeah, in regards to this package, we talk about other stuff that's in there, and the idea of being able to see the lost levels and the making of stuff. A lot of stuff is gated behind the story completion, which makes sense. You can import your save. I was going to say that before, but I forgot. You can just import your save and just keep going, but it won't class that, as far as I know, as a story completion thing.
Oh, it did for me.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So that's good. Yeah, the way that I did it, maybe I just went in the menus the wrong order or something. But you can just continue where you were before, which is a good carryover. They do have a tease in here for the Grounded documentary, which is the overall behind-the-scenes thing for The Last of Us 2, which I kind of wish was in here if I'm paying the money.
Yeah,
but it's better that that's in a wider sense anyway on YouTube.
It's getting added to the game in a post-launch update, but it is a shame that it isn't there for launch because, like I said, you've already got the director's commentary over the cutscenes in the actual game, and then you've got the lost levels and the commentary behind there. To me, it would have completed that sort of behind-the-scenes portfolio that you could have got from this game, but it will be coming whenever it releases. Yeah,
it's worth because I'm just kind of running down the things that they're selling this on. The other one is the guitar mode, which
I
is
haven't played that actually because I was crapping it.
I think I played the most of it, but it's like the most of us. But it's still the way that this thing controls. It's putting all 6 strings on the touchpad, so they're very close to each other. It was the same. It's the same controllability that was in there when you played as Ellie and you or you're sitting in the cinema and you can mess around and stuff. Except that in this one, it's almost like a photo mode type thing. You can change backgrounds. You can actually change the type of guitar, which is fun. You can get a banjo and an electric guitar. You got to unlock them. You can switch who you're sitting down as. You can play as Joel. You can switch to Gustavo Santaolalla, the composer, which is awesome. And so that's a neat little mode. I wish they'd made it a bit easier to go between the strings, because you end up just sort of catching the other ones. And I think I don't know how they would necessarily have done it.
Yeah.
But still, it's cool to be able to go through so many different chord forms and put little pieces together. It's nice. It's a nice little thing. You can get rid of the hood and just make little songs.
As someone who can't play a guitar and doesn't really have fingers long enough to do it.
What do you mean?
Just wanted to pop you.
Long enough to do it?
Is it like not an authentic experience because you're playing it on a game, you're playing it on a touchpad, but I've seen people replicate riffs from famous songs and do it really well and convincingly. Is there enough satisfaction from that if you are familiar with the chords for the songs?
As someone who plays guitar a lot, I want to say 2 things at once. No, it's nowhere near a real guitar.
Yes.
But 2, it is satisfying. It's fun. It's the same thing where all the chords are on a wheel, but I think there's more chords in this than there were in the base game. But yeah, you can still, if you're elegant enough with finger pushes, you can play some multi-string riff stuff, and you can put it on electric guitar and whatever. And there's lots of different effects for the guitar tone as well. It's just one of those things. It was like when I was going through the lost levels and they were like, oh, we had this mode where you could mix drinks. Yeah. And I was just like, it's the last, sure. Do you not want to spend the time on something else? And then it's in this package, it's like, well, what have we got, guys? Well, Johnny in the corner's doing a guitar mode. We should probably put that in there, make sure it's worth the money.
Yeah, no, I get you. The guitar mode isn't the system seller, right? That's not going to get
it is one of their bullet points, though.
No, it is, but I do think this entire package is, if you're buying it new, if you're buying it for the £40, it's the best way to play The Last of Us Part 2. It's the best way to experience it, in my opinion. But for the $10 upgrade, I think stuff like the guitar, they're fan favorites. Yeah, they're more niche, but as a kind of additive thing, a lot of people got a lot of fun out of that. There was a lot of videos, like I said, that kind of went viral. It's obviously not going to justify the package on its own, but I like that it's in there because they did make that system and just fleshing out a little bit with new characters. It's a fun one. It's better than the racetrack they put in Death Stranding, put it that way.
Ranking all the pointless Sony add-ons that have been in all these modes.
Well, should we? Unless there's any more points we need to get through. Like, where do you think this lands, and do you think it justifies the money? Because for me, this upgrade is somewhere between Ghost of Tsushima's Director's Cut and Death Stranding's Director's Cut. It doesn't have the expansion that Ghost of Tsushima did, but its extras to me are way more appealing than what we got from Death Stranding. And I love both of those games, by the way. I've got both of those upgrades just for the visuals. Same. But this time around, I think it's kind of somewhere in the middle. Like I said, if you haven't played The Last of Us Part 2, it's an appealing product. It's justifies the price, I think. And as an upgrade, it's got a bit more meat on its bones than Death Stranding did. And as a look behind the scenes, it easily justifies. I mean, we got a review copy, which we'll no doubt put in the description. But I would have bought it for. I would have paid those £10 to get access to those modes. I
don't think I would have paid for it. I think it was one of those things where in the run-up to the launch, it just never really got my attention. I don't think it's essential. I think it's good to have. If you haven't played through The Last of Us 2, you might as well get this version. But if I'm ranking it, or if I'm thinking about those other editions that have come with the other director's cuts, like Ghost of Tsushima had that whole story chapter about Jin's father, which is really, really cool. And I think I don't say it's essential, but it's really, really good to have. Death Stranding had that little Metal Gear stealth level that was in there.
That was crap, man.
I was for a Death Stranding attempted stealth with Kojima going like, "Hey, Metal Gear, remember Metal Gear?" I was like, "I remember Metal Gear." That was fun. I think for this, when I think of the meat of the specifics of what I was going in for, what do I want to see? The literal word remastered, like we're talking about, for me, splitting hairs on the resolution change. It already looked gorgeous on the PS5 based on the PS4 Pro version. So I think that's not a knock against it, but it's just getting very honest about what it is to me. And then the lost levels, I think, like I said, they were over in half an hour collectively, and I didn't necessarily enjoy the content that was in them anyway. The no return mode is really cool. I think if you like Last of Us combat, that's worth paying for. But personally, the roguelike stuff, it's just not enough to make me go like, oh, I want to indulge in this side of it. But it's cool. If you haven't played through The Last of Us 2, this should be where you come in. But I think if you're on the fence like I wasn't blown away by what actually is here. It's almost exactly what I thought it was.
I'd agree. I think if if you're not itching to go back to The Last of Us 2 anyway, this might not convince you because you already get an exceptional version if you already own a PlayStation 5.
Totally.
But if you haven't played The Last of Us since you played it on the base PlayStation 4, for instance, then it definitely is enough of a jump, I think. We were lucky enough to play the original game on PS4 Pro, and then I played it again on PS5. So I've experienced this game a lot in variously upgraded forms. But yeah, I think it's just depends on the context in which you're looking at this game. Like if you're someone like us who've played a lot of it, probably not worth it. If you're someone who hasn't played it, I'd say definitely worth it. If you're someone who hasn't played it since the original PlayStation 4, I'd also say those graphical improvements are big enough to justify it because you're now getting 60 frames per second, you're now getting 4K, you're now getting all of these features on top. I'd say, time to jump in.